Welcome everybody to a very special episode of The Blame Game on the first two matches of the quarterfinals, brought to you by Acer Predator. They are the official sponsors of the League of Legends 2017 World Championship, and their monitors are being used for all of the competitions. Now, the reason I say this is a special episode is because I'm doing it basically less than 24 hours after the game happened, so I don't have quite as much time to put into script and production, and I didn't have an opportunity to rewatch the games from the community criticism perspective, so this is just my own personal opinion from my first watching. In the first series between Samsung Galaxy and Longju, I would have to say the person I put the most blame on for the series is BDD. This is a guy who was touted as never dying, the KDA king in Korea, and he died 7 times in the first 2 games in this series. If you look at his actual gameplay, he made some really big mistakes in the first game. The enemy team in Samsung has given the counter pick over to Cuvee to make sure that he doesn't get rolled over by Khan. BDD has the counter pick on Crown and is clearly outclassing him in the early game. The problem comes from the fact that he then calls his jungler's first level 6 gank mid to chunk out the Malzahar. And even if you don't get the kill here, this is still a good play on its own. The problem is that when you make this play, you know the enemy jungler is gonna have to react or he'll be losing his mid-outer turret in the first 10 minutes of the game. So BDD going for this dive here is a huge mistake. I wouldn't say BDD played outright bad, but he did have a lot of mistakes that hurt his ability to control this game. The one example that we just gave there, he roams bottom and goes for a flash, but does not actually get a kill, making him much more susceptible to mid lane ganks against a Malzahar. And then later on in the game, he goes for a big play, but ults the wrong target. In game 2, BDD continues thrashing Crown in the mid lane and sets up a really nice mid freeze here where both junglers feel like they're gonna have to come. And of course, Longju gets in on it first, getting the kill onto Crown. Once again at 6 though, BDD is going to fall prone to a big multi-man play out of Samsung around the mid lane. In the final game, he gets counterpicked by Crown with the Lissandra into Taliyah, but feels like he doesn't have nearly the same game impact as Crown did in the previous game. I wouldn't say BDD was the only issue though, because obviously there were a lot of things going on here. Samsung massively stepped up ambition, had a much better series than anything you would have thought he would play based off his group stage, as well as the fact that the bot lane for Samsung, which had looked a little bit shaky, stepped up and beat Longju a lot of times. Now, they didn't have a lot of winning matchups. They were all mostly okay, and sometimes, like in game 2, their draft made them feel very strong around the bot lane, where Taliyah and Shen have these globals that can come in and help them. But either way, you would have expected a lot more out of Praying Gorilla. For the Misfits vs SKT series, it's hard to really blame anybody in such a great series, but there are a couple things to talk about. When the teams feel so close, because we did see Misfits matching SKT with relatively standard comps in game 4 and 5, so I think it's fair to say that these two teams are relatively closely matched. The draft becomes very, very important. In game 1, Misfits make a critical mistake in taking the Taric in the first rotation. This allows the Trundle pick to be a flex pick that can always go up into the top lane, or if the top lane matchup doesn't look good, you can always put it bottom versus the Taric, and that's what ends up happening. It becomes a situation where after that Taric pick comes in with the Trundle, I'm not sure what Misfits can do to get themselves out of that situation. There's not many carries that you can take into Trundle that can't get counterpicked, and there's not many tanks that you want to pick at all because hell, it's a Trundle up there. So they end up going with Rumble, the Trundle gets flexed down in the bot lane, Jace goes up there into a winning matchup, and to top it off, they had Galio the whole time, who can end up in either position as well. Galio into Rumble isn't too bad. It is a little rough early on, but it's nothing that I'm sure Huni couldn't handle. So this was just a draft that, with all the flex picks that were enabled by the early Taric pick, Misfits kind of threw this game in a series where they had the opportunity to win. I think it's fair to say that game 1 draft was a big problem, but I don't think it's fair to say drafting over the series was a really big problem. I know in game 4, I saw some people having issues a little bit with the Karma mid pick, but they were doing what they felt they needed to do to be able to win the series, and it honestly felt like they had the chance to until that mid dive, which, yeah, you can throw any criticisms you want for that. It was way, way too aggressive. It might have cost them the series as well. You don't almost beat SKT without being able to take advantage of some of their members, and that happened in the bot lane with Wolf and Bang. They were the targets of a lot of weird picks going on, so I don't really fault them for that part. But in things like game 3, where they take a Vayne, completely fail to execute on it, and overtrade heavily level 1, when they could have slowly won that laning phase out after the initial trade, was a big mistake out of them, and it basically allowed the bot lane of Misfits to get off the ground and start pressuring them. That's going to do it for this episode of The Blame Game. Please let me know what you think of this format, where it's a little less community driven and more just my own opinion. It was kind of done out of necessity because there's TwitchCon going on. I'm going to be doing a GLT later tonight, or maybe it was before, depending on when this video comes out. But let me know what you think about the format where it's just more me giving my impressions versus responding to the community. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you guys on Wednesday again for another episode on the next 2 series, back to the regular format. Thank you guys for watching. This weekend, I got GLT, I got this, I got TwitchCon where I'm shooting stuff with Offline TV. I'm doing a 1v1 tournament thingy there, so I'm gonna be so busy. Hope I don't die.